Welcome to the Psychology Talk podcast. We are your hosts, Dr. Scott Hoye, clinical psychologist,
and Kyle Miller, licensed counselor. Psychology Talk is a unique conversation about psychology around the globe. We speak with psychology experts to keep you informed about current issues and trends. We advocate toward reducing stigma and educate about mental health.
While you're listening, please take a moment to give us a review and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, or your favorite streaming service. It helps us to continue providing you with quality programming. And now, enjoy the episode. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Today, my guest is Dr. Kahn. He's a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Maine and Illinois. He's the past president of the Society of Clinical and Experimental Hypnosis. He's held leadership positions in the American Society for Clinical Hypnosis, and he has been an editor in the review board for the International Journal of Clinical and Experimental Hypnosis, which is the journal of the Society of Clinical and Experimental Hypnosis. And oddly enough, Steve is here today to talk about a lot of things, but primarily the important role of hypnosis in couples work. Hi, Steve. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And just to let everyone know, Steve is a mentor of mine and a former professor. He was my dissertation chair and basically has bothered me a lot academically and professionally. And he's a good guy and has a good sense of humor. So this should be a fun conversation while we explore couples work with hypnosis. So, Steve, what can you tell us about that? And what can you tell us about this so that both the professional and the lay audience or the consumers might benefit? Like, what is hypnosis? How does it help couples with their problems?
Okay, well, the question of what is hypnosis is a very large one, and there are many, many definitions. I use a very simple definition with my patients, and that is hypnosis is a state where your body is relaxed, although that's not necessarily the case, but body tends to be relaxed and your mind is open to suggestion. It doesn't mean you will do everything that the person will tell you, that your hypnotist will tell you. It doesn't mean that, you lose control or that you lose consciousness. Neither one happens. But I think that the altered state, I do believe it's an altered state of consciousness that does help you to take in things from a different vantage point. And that includes taking in perspectives on your relationship. So let me just kind of draw an analogy here. When we talk about hypnosis and the fading of the generalized reality orientation, we talk about how the outside fades away as you kind of get into that special space, the altered state of relationship that is hypnosis. And that can be likened to a light on the ceiling being pulled down as you and your hypnotist talk, and it gets closer and closer, and the general reality outside that little area is no longer paid attention to. So
more like it's like your state of conscious or state of awareness gets more focused, like a spotlight rather than a floodlight.
Thank you. Good.
Okay.
Good.
Okay.
I like it, Scott. I will use it. Okay.
I think I borrowed that from somebody from a class I took. It might have been Steve Kahn. I don't know, but good analogy.
So when a couple comes into my office, and sometimes these couples are well-known people who are pillars of the community. They're very well-respected, thoughtful, intelligent people. So they come into my office, and pretty soon the couple is fighting like nobody's business. Well, you started it. No, you started it. Don't you remember? and going into incredibly small details and just at each other's throats. So I said to myself, what could this be but pretty severe age regression? So these couples are hypnotizing themselves, pillars of the community, but they get into this hypnotic state with each other and become very regressed, age regression to a T.
Regression that is not in the service of the ego, it seems like.
Absolutely. Regression perhaps in service of the id. Who knows? But the idea is that this light, as it comes down from the ceiling in hypnosis or spotlight, turns on the two of them, and they become, in this rarefied light, become more susceptible to not only positive suggestion, but to the negative. People become highly attuned to little movements in the face of their partner. And it's very easy to interpret those or even misinterpret those. Mm-hmm. So the couple comes in already in an altered state, state of relationship. So they're kind of my job is to,
they're kind of projecting stuff onto the other person a lot rather than picking up the information in the present tense. Yeah.
Right. And so I believe that hypnosis is a unique way of helping couples to, absolutely unique, of helping couples to emerge from that kind of more primitive childhood state to move forward in time and focus to the present and dealing much more in the present as adults rather than children who have been hurt.
Okay. Well, I would say every time I see a couple, I point out to the couple, usually after the first couple of sessions, sometimes in the first session itself, that they're tattling on each other to me in front of each other. It's like they're tattling to dad or mom or whomever I might be. I don't know, the dog, the neighbor's dog, the neighbor's cat.
Right.
They're tattling on each other to me. So is that kind of what you're talking about? Do you also experience that? Like,
yes.
Okay, I have two children. I know what it was like to discuss issues with children, and now,
right.
So are you able to keep yourself from being sucked into that trance of this?
Well, sometimes it's very hard because some couples want you so badly to take sides, just so badly, and keeping that parity is sometimes very, very difficult because people bring up all kinds of things like I'm sitting in judgment of their partner and, well, you wouldn't fight so much if you weren't drinking all the time kind of statements that come up. And, they want me to turn and say, stop drinking and stop fighting. And as powerful as hypnosis is, unfortunately, it cannot help. It cannot help the couple to just simply stop fighting. If I could do that, I'd probably be working at the White House, helping, world couples stop fighting.
Yes,
at any rate,
you would have the job of the president's analyst, which is not a good job to have, from what I recall from the movie.
Right. I have. Well, go ahead. Ask your question.
No, you have what?
I have a 3-step process that I use treating couples.
Okay.
And I would love to outline that, but you may want me to do that later in this broadcast.
Well, certainly not on another broadcast. I'd be in competition with someone else or myself. So what does it look like? I mean, you can talk about the 3-step process first, or you could maybe answer this question, or maybe the 3-step process would answer this. What does it look like? Do you hypnotize both people and have them work with each other in a kind of dual state of trance? Or do you see them separately and do hypnosis? Or Is it kind of like that group induction? Like, what is it?
No, that's a very excellent question, because sometimes it is important not to do hypnosis at the same time with couples, but most of the time it's a dual type thing where they're both hypnotized.
What would make it contraindicated?
Yeah, okay. If one of the partners has post-traumatic stress disorder of the type of sexual disorder, it's also contraindicated when one member of the couple is not really hypnotizable or is only lightly hypnotizable, because they won't let go enough to go into trance. At those points, sometimes I work with that individual to help them become a little more hypnotizable. Yes, hypnotizability can be learned.
Yes.
Taught and learned.
Okay.
Taught, if it's taught well, it can be learned.
Well,
so
I'm not going to argue with you, but someone else might.
Someone else might. Yeah. That's right. It used to be considered a trait, and it doesn't really act enough like a trait, both in research and in, for instance, the study I did with Erica Fromm at the University of Chicago of self-hypnosis. These people learned to go into trance more easily over the 4 weeks that they were practicing self-hypnosis. And they learned also to be in a deeper trance. Yes, the trait people do not believe that.
Well, I think I remember there's a real famous study that Charles Tart did of dual hypnosis, right, with two students, and they reported deeper states of trance, which is not supposed to happen, right? Like they're at like level 5 or something, and that's not supposed to happen. And that was one of the findings in this case study that he talked about.
Right, and this particular case study, they went on even to participate in each other's imagery.
Yeah,
I don't know exactly how Tart did that study. It was a very interesting case. I'm not sure that you can participate in others' dream imagery when you're in the state of hypnosis, which is what they claimed. They also claimed to be doing it by themselves together, and I think they got. I think one of them was married. I think they were getting into some very deep things, and eventually they did stop, and they didn't keep up their relationship, which might be a good idea not to try some of these things at home. At any rate,
that's right. Couples out there, do not hypnotize each other and enter each other's dream hypnotic states and get closer to each other, because that might ruin your marriage. No. Well, speaking, all right, that's a little bit convoluted there, but I kind of like to reverse engineer that. If Tart was able to, in that one maybe irreplicable study, to do that, then it would make sense that working with couples with hypnosis would probably be a better way to bond them.
Right.
So maybe you could talk about how that happens.
Okay, sure. The openness and vulnerability that you experience in hypnosis is one of the first things that helps that. But it also is the case that hypnosis, you can do a negative hallucination to the person's fight or flight response to the partner, so that this person who normally overreacts, we dial down the reactivity by having the person not see that same thing anymore. Either it disappears when the partner makes it, or it becomes a signal for something else.
And so for people at home, a negative hallucination is? When
you hallucinate something away rather than hallucinate something there. Let's see, it is a hallucination in reverse that is, let's say, a trait or a person is just not there.
Mm-hmm.
So that you can, a facial expression is not there. So that's what's termed a negative hallucination.
As opposed to a positive where you make somebody see something that really isn't there physically. So
exactly.
So you're saying, like, so for instance, in the case of like a facial expression that subliminally just bothers the bejesus out of one part of the couple, you could have them ignore
yes.
it. Right? Is that kind of
have
what you're
them
saying?
ignore it or not even see it after a while, because before when couples are in this tight fight or flight process, or I actually call it the flight or withdrawal process, but they're in this process with each other, they become so elegantly fine-tuned to all the little expressions or even a word, but mostly expressions. John Gottman, the couples guru, says that contempt, one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, contempt, is very easily transmitted through the simple frown, like this. Although your people can't see it, it's just like that. That can show, and simple frown can show, intense contempt. And I wish there was a way to getting this across a video, but the contempt is a little frown and it's a little squint of the eyes, and it's just like sometimes wives and husband can floor each other. They don't have to punch each other; they can floor each other emotionally.
Yeah, and if they were amongst, friends, for instance, and these things were setting each other off, this sometimes happens when couples have difficulty. The people who are the innocent bystanders of this interaction are like, what just happened? I don't see, why either of you is so upset. Yeah. So
they don't have a negative hallucination, those innocent bystanders. They're just not attuned and don't see anything that happened, really.
Correct.
So they are probably just not attuned. That's a good way to put it. So the outsiders. But, some people, couples are very interested in their spouse's responses at parties or wherever, and they do like it when, they can interpret one of the other partner as raising an eyebrow and looking at, they know that means a certain something. Well, that can be a very positive communication, which hypnosis can create these other connections to the person. So I can sometimes,
Go ahead. You can sometimes what?
I can sometimes help a couple simply by having them view each other when they're fighting as a kind of a mask on their face with ugly features, very ugly features. And they react, and rather than have them react to the mask, I say, let the mask, in trance, I say, let the mask fall down, and now you can see the person behind the mask who's either hurting or loving you, but they're not that mask. The mask is artificial, and it's now gone.
Okay.
So
basically you're kind of working with, as some might use the term, you're rearranging or shifting meaning through shifting submodalities, as some people might call them, or visual, affective, auditory kind of cues that we all kind of use to create our inner world.
Right. Yeah. See, and this is all part of the first phase of couples treatment with hypnosis. The first phase is trying to tone down reactivity. And that is fighting just is rampant. There's a book even called The Angry Marriage, which shows how anger can take over everything, can become a part of every little facet of the relationship. And that's when people really are hurting, but they put it aside because the anger subsumes that hurt and absorbs it, so they don't feel it. Mm-hmm. So instead, what I have is people can either take a time out. I have them visualize the other person giving them a T with their hands, making a T like technical in basketball. And that stands for timeout. I have a set of rules, but it's still very hard for couples who are fighting to do that. So I have them, feel some of those emotions in hypnosis and then give them the T to stop, and they go to their separate places. They can see themselves going to their separate places, not giving in to that intense desire to just destroy the guy or the girl. Anyway, the woman. Anyway, so I think that
or the guy and the guy, or the girl and the girl, or them and them.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Right. Thank you. Anyway, that first part can take anywhere from a month to sometimes a year, that first phase, because people are so entrenched in this way of being. And one of the things I have them also do is, in that first phase, is to make some time for each other to be in a positive situation. Now, if somebody's not able to do that, we have a long time in decreasing the reactivity. But I usually do start with couples who are not too damaged at this point, if they've come in early rather than when it's almost too late. And it is true that about 60% of couples who go in for treatment get divorced because they wait too long to come into treatment.
I believe that.
And I wish I could quote the source for that, but it's somewhere. Anyway, the point is that decreasing this reactivity is really, really crucial. And I have some positive responses by having couples just sit together and make a recording for them sitting together in hypnosis. If I can get them to hold hands at this point, then they hold hands and they can feel a sense of connection. Part of that hypnotic stance is they feel so connected, they almost feel like there's threads of white light connecting them from their torso to the other person's torso, and they can feel positive feelings going across that. Like I say, some couples can't do that for a while, but if this is going to work, hopefully they can do it sooner rather than later. So I have them go. The first thing I do is have them relax together, simply relax together, find their own individual space, and when they feel ready to, they invite the partner into that separate special space. That's the first step. The second step is to go back in time, do an age regression, simultaneous age regression, where the couple goes back to when they first got together and felt that they're really in love. So is this the
second phase feeling. Or the first phase?
This is the second. One of the second things I do in the first phase.
Okay, gotcha.
Decrease reactivity.
Okay.
There's a negative side to the first phase, which is reducing reactivity. The positive side to that is trying to enhance just a little bit of a sense of togetherness. So those things, sometimes people who are fighting all the time don't really remember what it felt like when they first got together. And if they can age regress back to that time, it brings some positivity into the relationship. So that's phase one. Let's go to phase two.
Okay.
And that is...
And that's 2 years later. However long it takes. A month to...
However long it takes. Yeah. Usually I can get into it within 4 or 5 months, particularly if one or both of them are highly hypnotizable, then it really goes quickly. So the reactivity can be stopped. So phase 2 is looking at family of origin antecedents to this.
Okay.
Usually 2 things. One, parents as models for marital behavior, and 2, parents, unfinished business with parents, which is what the Harville Hendricks work is all about. That you have an unconscious marriage and your goal is to make it conscious. Mm-hmm. So I have them go back, age regression to times with their parents and what they see. Mm-hmm. And those I sometimes do individually. That is, I have one person sitting quietly while the other person goes in, depending on, I have gathered some information before I do it, depending on how bad it was. I mean, if parents had a incredibly hostile relationship with each other, I might have the person whose parents that is go into trance and age regress to seeing that and to focusing on their feelings. Mm-hmm. What that does is it helps with the empathy of the other partner, but also it helps the partner to see that where this horrible mask that sometimes gets on the face of their loved one comes from. So that's very helpful. And am I being clear?
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, It's a lot of the same things that you would wind up doing in couples therapy without hypnosis, or individual therapy, or couples, right? Attachment issues, developmental issues,
right,
cultural differences,
exactly, and so it also helps sometimes when they become aware of the parental influence. Whether it's unfinished business, that they're looking for a kind of love from their partner that they didn't get from their mother or father. Mm-hmm. We can also see those things. And again, just the awareness of that helps. But it's also, I have another intervention for later on after we've done that work, whereby they both go back in time together and see their parents not as adults, not as that big person in their life or big persons in their life that, altered their view of things forever, but just as people. And so they shrink into very, very small people, and the person who's watching becomes very big, so that they can see that the parents that were behaving like small children rather than adults, and that they don't have to be those small children. They don't have to still go on and react.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's phase 2. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, couples treatment and individuals treatment ends at that point because they're not fighting and they have these insights and empathy for each other that's grown. But I am very intent upon saying that is not enough.
Okay.
It's clearly not enough. And instead I work on intimacy issues. And I have them do intimate things in hypnosis. For instance, I don't know if you're familiar with sensate focus.
Mm-hmm. As a sexual therapy, yeah.
Yeah, as a sexual therapy. But it's also, I start out by having them focus on massaging each other's hand and giving and receiving feedback. Then they go to their shoulders. And later on, they do the sensate focus naked, but not to start out with, particularly with couples who are hurting badly. No.
And probably not in the consulting room.
Well, the hand stuff can be done in the therapy office.
I was going to say, let me clarify. What kind of therapist are you?
Yes, right. Right. Very good.
Is this
anyway?
Did you train at Esalen? Are you a encounter groupies guru or no?
Well, if I can be available to them during intimate acts, then of course I can help them go faster and easier. Of course. No, never mind. You can edit that out, please.
Well, I think people will get that you're joking around.
I hope so. Just like the president used to joke around, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, you're an important person, but you're not the president. So I think you get a pass.
Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, okay. So
anyway,
let's clarify here. Sorry for my jokes.
Sorry for mine.
We're both sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, people. Yes.
So, like, you're talking about the sensate focusing starting in, like, actual sensate focusing. And forgive me, because when you're saying in hypnosis, does that mean you have them actually touch or imagine? Because you can do a lot of things in hypnosis, especially if the person's particularly hypnotizable and has good capacity for imagery. So what are you having them do?
I'm having them do right there in the office, hand massage and giving feedback. And then at the end, having them go into trance and imagine themselves doing that at home. Okay. So that they can continue. I mean, it is to do hypnosis of something that's going to happen in the future is like age progression or it's post-hypnotic suggestion, both.
Yeah. Or
so it does help
rehearsing.
People to do that.
Yeah.
So at any rate, I don't stop treatment until they have had quite a number of months of positive interactions that are not ruptured. And that's one of the key things, that if they have a fight or a skirmish or whatever, that it's not ruptured, the connection is not ruptured any longer by that, and it doesn't, decrease back into the angry marriage, descend back into that awful space that couples sometimes get into.
Okay, right. So it helps you're helping to kind of work on the regression that happens with any change, right, or any learning, regressing in the sense of like a baby learning to walk and then dropping on all fours to just see if they can go back to the place that they're used to. They get used to being in this angry, ticked-off marriage place, and you kind of reinforce that longer-term positive change.
Yeah, and sometimes couples do, particularly during COVID, where they're forced to be together night and day. Sometimes they do get, and Zoom is a wonderful thing, but they do fall back into some of these spaces. I just had a couple recently who called me up because it was a fight over COVID too, but at COVID and a child that was from mixed marriage, not a mixed marriage,
blended,
a blended. Thank you, blended marriage. And so, these issues, particularly when you're at home together night and day, can become very intense. And so the regression happens back to that, fighting stage where you're blaming the other person for everything, pointing the finger instead of looking at what it is that you are doing and where it is that this comes from. So sometimes it's necessary to go back to phase 1, proceed through phase 2, and then get to phase 3 again. But I do think it's really important, and people do not think about this. Therapists don't think about this enough, about enhancing intimacy. There's also visualizing yourself doing something that's really fun together, and that you've done in the past or that you want to do, And that is visualizing doing it together and then really basking in that sense of connectedness that you get from doing things together, whether it's going to a movie, out to dinner, which you can't do nowadays, but you can visualize yourself doing that.
So would you say that like you've been having to do a lot more reinforcement and patching things up and going back and fixing things with couples during COVID?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. No, people who were, hadn't seen me for a year or two and were doing well up until COVID have been, it is a pretty intense stress. And yes, there's stress from the outside, and then there's what I call co-stress or couple stress created by the particular type of connection that you have created with your partner, with your spouse. And
right.
That co-stress can be really deadly if the external stress is strong enough. You don't have the connection to repel the external stress. The external stress creates even more conflict and hurt.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, just to shift from, if you're lucky enough to work from home, or if it's a cursed blessing, is the fact that you have to schedule yourself, which is added stress, right? It's added work. You're working to manage yourself and then manage people or manage your workload and manage your home, and you're on top of each other, and the dog has to go to the vet, and so on and so forth. The kids have to be taken care of. So it is just this compounded amount of responsibilities and no way to feel like you have your own space for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well put. Very well put. Yeah. So, it does impact couples, and yes, couples, I have gotten more requests for couples therapy since COVID began than I have of individual therapy. So,
wow. Okay.
That may tell you something.
Well, you do a lot of couples therapy even before COVID, right? Like it was one of your specialties.
Oh, yeah.
You've developed this kind of way of working with people. Has this caught on? I know you mentioned before we started the interview that you have a colleague, Carolyn Deitch, who's well known in the psychological and counseling and social work hypnosis world for anxiety work, and the two of you have been kind of rolling out this couples therapy model over time. But has this caught on more? Is there? Do you see other people kind of using your model and training people with it, or primarily the two of you?
There are a number of people who have written about and who teach hypnosis with couples, and they have produced books. One is an Ericksonian hypnosis. The other is a more standard hypnosis person. But it did not catch on, I think, because it was, as presented, it was a little bit scattered and not fine-tuned. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I wouldn't say I'm the absolute, pioneer here, but there are... and Carolyn, I first met Carolyn when she was giving a workshop on anxiety in couples with Cher Daniel at ASH. So I do think that it's kind of like the zeitgeist. But unfortunately, the zeitgeist hasn't caught on fully. I think it may be partly because I've written this up while I've taught it in at SESH and ASH both, and even at the International Society, but still it's known among therapists. But I think what I'm trying to do now is write a popular book about it so that people can see exactly how it works with a lot of details and a lot of examples. And then I think people will come more readily for hypnosis with couples. But it's just it can't spread fast enough, I think, because it's the therapists in hypnosis know about it, but the therapists outside of hypnosis who sometimes think hypnosis is fringe or something like that, they have difficulty assimilating hypnosis, much less hypnosis with couples.
That's true. Have you incorporated, you mentioned Harlan Hendricks. Have you mentioned Gottman? Are you looking to kind of pull some of those references? Because as you know, in all domains of expertise, there are trends. And right now, the main trend in mind-body is some kind of meditation, like mindfulness, like Jon Kabat-Zinn and whatnot, which borrows heavily from hypnosis scripts. But also, Gottman is as well they should be. They have a kind of a very well-honed evidence-based school of couples therapy. Are you thinking about including some of that information in there as well?
I shudder to say this, but yes, I have used some of the ideas of incorporated, some of the ideas of both Harville Hendricks and John Gottman in my work. And even when I would present my work, particularly I would always talk about Gottman and its 5-to-1 ratio. The 5 positive interactions to compensate for 1 negative reaction.
Okay.
And particularly within couples who are really honed into each other's negativity. But he also has the 4 horsemen, criticism.
Stonewalling's one of them. Yep.
Criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling.
Yeah.
Right. And those 4 things I point out, and if I see them, the defensiveness and criticism is usually part of that ongoing reactivity.
Right. And
sometimes one is criticizing the other, and sometimes one is, reacting defensively. So I do talk about those trends, and that's one of the things that I sometimes have instead of a T, see themselves use a T, I have a big bright red stop sign come up in their mind.
Okay.
And help them to stop this kind of intense interaction. Okay. Now, the withdrawal is equivalent to stonewalling, which is part of a cycle.
Which also could be, you could also incorporate attachment theory into that. That would be somebody with kind of a dismissive approach to relationships versus somebody who's more anxious, who might lash out or cling tenaciously to the person they think is going to abandon them. Yeah.
Right. And, I have been trained in emotionally focused treatment which has attachment theory at its base. And, what you look for are these types of interactions. So, all of those kind of inform the response, but the response that I make to these people in those kinds of interactions, whether it's withdrawal or stonewalling or whatever, is through hypnotic intervention.
Well, you also mentioned those 5 positives to 1 negative, right, to cancel out 1 negative. I could imagine that in hypnosis, through imagination and the rehearsing of that, or post-hypnotic suggestion, or however you want to put it, or progression in time, you could have a person, if they were to do that, say with an MP3 or just in self-hypnosis, once a day, they're kind of reinforcing this process a lot faster. So I assume your couples therapy might have more traction with hypnosis included into the modality, plus maybe shorten the process. For some people.
Absolutely.
Or even more so, like, that 60% of people divorcing, you might be able to use time distortion to make them experience these things a lot more earlier on in their relationship, imaginatively.
Right.
And that sounds like delusional thinking for those of you who don't know hypnosis or who haven't experienced it. But in hypnosis, you can you get to play and shift and change the field of your inner experience a lot more and be more flexible in the way you think and feel than if you don't use it. It's a very helpful tool, which I think everybody who does therapy should at least have a good couple of trainings, professional trainings in it to just to kind of reframe how they think about thinking.
Yeah. Well, Ash and Sesh both have certification programs which have you reach a certain level of expertise before you try anything complicated, like working with PTSD and like working with couples. Couples is a complicated because there are two individuals there with you rather than one, and as if one isn't complicated enough, but two can get very complicated. And sometimes, just like with an individual, you don't understand, why is this happening? What's going on here? And yes,
and you don't,
it takes a while.
And sometimes you have to send both children to their room.
Yes.
And teach them to send each other to their room.
Exactly.
No.
Exactly. Well, no, it is, because when they are caught up in this negative cycle, it is so easy to trigger one or the other. And if you trigger one, the other gets triggered pretty quickly. And so, yes, you do have to separate. I have them go to their rooms. Sometimes I have them send an email to each other saying what it is you're trying to say, but without any emotional parts to it. So you first, I have them either write or think or say exactly, in print, whatever it is they're feeling, which is this person is a total jerk. And then to take away the jerk statements and just look at what it is that you're experiencing, how painful it is, and what it is that you want to say to the other person.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Kind of like if one way to set it up would be, if you were at work and you were sending an email to a boss, if you got angry at your boss and you had this impulse to send an email to them that was not very kosher or not very positive, would you learn from that experience and maybe not do that again? Would your manager, if they were a nice manager, they say there's this thing called etiquette, email etiquette. Maybe you should, you can write that email out, but pause for a day before you send it and think about what the implications are of it. Yeah.
Well, and I say, the limbic system gets charged up in these ways, particularly by partners. It takes at least an hour for it to settle down. So don't send anything to the person before an hour has elapsed. But a lot of people can, within an hour, settle down and get themselves out of it. But like I say, couples that are really, really entrenched, it really doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you have to, this reactivity is just such a powerful thing that takes over, and it's bigger than either partner in the couple.
Well, it makes sense if your home is being invaded and you know how to take care of things, or if you're being attacked by a cheetah on the Serengeti, which probably doesn't happen much these days for most people on the planet, at least the people I talk to. It's okay to be reactive, but like in these situations, you're applying the wrong tool to a good tool in the wrong way. Yeah.
Right. I mean, fight or flight was adaptive for many, many eons before we came into civilization as we have it today. And some of the time, I say, the anger isn't wrong. It just needs to be expressed differently. Yeah. And when people learn how to express it differently, that's the rational side, where you sit and express the angry side, and then you see what it is you're trying to say, then you express that. Then your response an individual's response, whether they're part of a couple or not, can very, very easily become an expression of some deeper feelings.
Yeah.
Which is what you're going for.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think you've explained this very well. Thanks for your time, Steve. Do you have anything else to declare besides your genius?
Well, I let other people declare that for me. I don't have to declare it myself. Thank you, Scott.
All right.
Anyway,
in that case, we can wrap up if you don't have anything else to add. Or maybe if people in Illinois or Maine want to reach you either as people who want help in couples therapy or for professionals who would like to contact you for training or supervision in couples therapy with hypnosis, how can they reach you?
Well, they can reach me at my Chicago telephone number, which is 773-793-3322. At this point, my practice is quite full, so I'm not really taking on new patients, but I don't know whether that will be the case later on. But for now, I do supervision of people who want to learn about using hypnosis with couples.
Okay, so excellent. Do you have a website?
My website is StephenKahn.net, STEPHEN, Kahn, all one word, Stephen Kahn, KAHN.net.
.net. Okay. Well, thanks for talking. This is very informative, and I will have to go brush up on all of these theories and wrap my head around hypnosis a little bit more and see how it's adaptable to other situations.
Cool. Very
all
cool.
Right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Scott, not only for this interview, but for the interviews you've been doing. They are very helpful.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Good.
All right. Thanks for listening to the Psychology Talk podcast. Did you know that the Psychology Talk podcast has a Facebook page and an Instagram page? It's true. You can find more information about other guests and episodes, as well as more information about psychology and mental health. And if you liked this episode, go ahead and like us on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, or Spotify and leave a review. It helps us grow our audience and provide more quality shows. All material copyright the Psychology Talk podcast. This podcast is for informative and entertainment purposes only. If you need a mental health professional, please seek one out. Music is provided by the band Serenati.